Highgate Hill is a bustling suburb located in the heart of Brisbane, Queensland, Australia. With a population of over 6,000 residents, it's a vibrant and diverse community that boasts a mix of old and new architecture, from traditional Queenslander homes to modern apartment complexes. The landscape is hilly and offers breathtaking views of the Brisbane River and the surrounding cityscape. The area is known for its leafy streets, parks, and gardens, making it a popular destination for families and nature lovers. However, as the case of the McCulkin family shows, even a bright and busy city like Brisbane can have a dark underbelly. Despite the beauty and charm of Highgate Hill, the case of the McCulkin family serves as a stark reminder that evil can strike anywhere, at any time. Barbara McCulkin, born in 1940 in New South Wales, was a vibrant and resilient woman who faced life's challenges head-on. In June 1960, Barbara married Billy McCulkin, a small-time crook and debt collector. They had two daughters, Leanne and Vicki. Despite the hardships that came with Billy's unpredictable lifestyle, Barbara remained steadfast in her commitment to her family. She navigated the complexities of their relationship with unwavering strength and grace. Despite growing up in a difficult era, Barbara always kept her head held high and worked tirelessly to provide for her two daughters. She was a woman of many talents, from cooking and sewing to providing an education for her children. She made sure they were well-fed, well-clothed, and well-educated. Barbara truly was the epitome of a great mother. She often worked long hours at a milk bar, serving customers with a smile despite the exhaustion that she felt. Meanwhile, Billy's criminal activities only continued to escalate, causing Barbara more stress and worry. She tried her best to shield her daughters from their father's dangerous associates and activities, but it was a constant battle. Billy was hardly ever home, and when he was often in a foul mood, causing tension in the household. Despite this, Barbara never gave up on her husband and tried her best to keep the family together. Barbara didn't have it easy. Living in a city like Brisbane in the 1970s, which was plagued with kidnappings, murders, and drug overdoses, made life even harder for her. According to Peter Campbell, a close friend of Barbara, she was always trying to get a better job. She just lived for the kids and did a great job at that. She did a great job as a mum. Peter's stepdaughter often had sleepovers at the McCulkin house with Leanne and Vicki, who attended the same school, Uranga State School. As time went on, the financial pressure only mounted, and Barbara struggled to make ends meet, and the darkness of Billy's criminal activities eventually caught up to the family. Billy the Mouse McCulkin was a notorious figure in Brisbane's underworld during the 1970s. Born in Queensland on March 15, 1940, Billy was a small, wiry man with a cunning mind and a quick temper. He was known to be a debt collector, getting money from the bookies and massage parlors, and was willing to do whatever it took to make a quick buck. Despite his family responsibilities, Billy's criminal activities continued to escalate, and he became more deeply involved with the Clockwork Orange Gang. Billy was determined to move up in the underworld and become a powerful figure. He was known to be violent and unpredictable, and his involvement with the gang only made him more dangerous. The Clockwork Orange Gang was a notorious group of thugs in the criminal underworld of Brisbane in the 1970s. Named after the famous book and movie, they were a group of young men who believed in living fast and making easy money. Along with Billy McCulkin, the gang consisted of Vincent O'Dempsey, Peter Hall, and Garry "Shorty" Dubois, among others. They were known to target clubs and businesses, demanding protection money in exchange for keeping them safe from harm. The gang had a reputation for using violence and intimidation to get what they wanted, and they were not afraid to use extreme measures to achieve their goals. Gangs would often target clubs because they knew they would get protection money. It was a simple equation: pay up, or your club would get bombed. One of the clubs they targeted was the Whiskey A Go-Go. On the night of March 8, 1973, the Whiskey A Go-Go Club was bursting with life as Brisbaneites, business people, and even police officers all gathered inside to enjoy the vibrant atmosphere and loud music. But as the night wore on, things took a sinister turn. At precisely 2:10 a.m., 2 drums of diesel fuel were brutally thrown into the foyer of the club, shattering the peaceful atmosphere with a loud bang. Within moments, the drums were ignited by a lit torch that was thrown through the open door. The burning diesel fuel spread quickly and sent a plume of carbon monoxide up to the club's main room on the first floor. The heat was intense, and the thick smoke made it difficult to see. The stairs were smeared with large quantities of grease, making it impossible for the patrons to escape. The door of the fire escape was also greased, which made it slippery and challenging to open. As the fire raged on, panic-stricken patrons tried to flee the building, but the flames had already blocked their way. The heat and smoke became unbearable, and 15 people lost their lives, including waitresses, musicians, and even an off-duty police officer. The tragedy shocked the city, and a circular plaque, ringed with the names of the 15 dead, still sits outside the Amelia Street doorway in Fortitude Valley, serving as a stark reminder of the horrific events that occurred that fateful night. About 100 patrons, bar staff, and entertainers had been inside the club at the time of ignition. Many had to escape by jumping from broken windows onto an awning and dropping 15 feet to the ground. As the investigation into the fire began, police quickly identified 2 prime suspects, John Andrew Stewart and James Richard Finch. They were charged and eventually convicted of the bombing. But many believed they were framed, and an inquest that could have widened the investigation was stopped after they were charged, even though it was clear that others were involved. The Whiskey A Go-Go fire was a tragedy that shook the city of Brisbane to its core. The night of the Whiskey A Go-Go fire, the flames didn't just engulf the club, but they also cast a dark shadow over Barbara McCulkin's heart. She had overheard the Clockwork Orange gang discussing their plans to bomb nightclubs, including the Whiskey A Go-Go, during one of their boozy meetings at Billy's home. Little did she know that her husband was deeply involved with the gang, and his actions would soon have devastating consequences. Barbara discussed this with John Ryan, a friend and security guard at the Whiskey A Go-Go, who agreed to help her disappear and reveal all the secrets of the infamous Clockwork Orange gang. The plan was to document everything on camera and recordings and bring justice to the victim of the gang's ruthless activities. But as the night went on, John received no call. Barbara had put the plan on hold to let her daughters Leanne and Vicki attend a birthday party. The night of January 16, 1974, was filled with anticipation and fear as John Ryan, the security guard at the Whiskey A Go-Go Club, waited anxiously for Barbara McCulkin's call. Meanwhile, in the streets of Brisbane, the McCulkin family's fate was already sealed. That evening, her daughters Vicki and Leanne went to Junine's 10th birthday party across the street, while Barbara was alone at home. Neighborhood friends Janet and Junine Gayton saw Vince and Shorty, also known as Vincent O'Dempsey and Garry Dubois, members of the Clockwork Orange gang, with Mrs. McCulkin at their Highgate Hill house, along with an orange Valiant Charger parked out the front. Dubois later drove the Charger to Peter Hall's house in Chermside, where he confessed that he and O'Dempsey were on the piss at the McCulkins' house, and he was going back for more. As the night went on, Leanne left her home from the birthday party alone at 8:30 p.m. A neighbor watched her as she entered the house. 2 hours later, around 10:15 p.m., Vicki returned home as well. But this was the last time anyone ever saw the McCulkin family alive. On January 18, 1974, the eerie emptiness of the McCulkins' home was the first sign that something was amiss. Billy McCulkin, Barbara's estranged husband, who had been involved with another woman, arrived to find the house abandoned. The sewing table held a dress mid-stitch. Barbara's purse was perched on the fridge, and the cats were locked away in the bathroom. The family had vanished without a trace. Detective Sergeant Virginia Gray revealed that Billy immediately suspected his criminal acquaintances, Shorty and Vince, and confronted them with the information he had gathered from one of the girls at the birthday party. But the suspects fled town within days of the confrontation, going into hiding. Despite being prime suspects, it took until April 2, 1980 for the duo to be charged with 3 counts of murder. However, in 1981, the case was dropped for lack of sufficient evidence, and the 2 men walked free. For the next 34 years, the case remained unsolved, until in 2014, when new evidence emerged following the reopening of the case that year. Apparently, the Queensland Police Cold Case Unit got a tip-off that hinted that O'Dempsey and Dubois might have confessed their involvement in the murder to trusted criminal associates. Detective Sergeant Virginia Gray and Detective Inspector Mick Dowie reopened the cold case of the McCulkin murders in 2014. They had little to go with until the tip-off was made. With that new information, Queensland Crime and Corruption Commission, known as the CCC, called in Peter Hall, a former criminal associate of Shorty Dubois. The CCC is an independent Queensland government entity which has the power to investigate major crimes and corruption by using coercive powers to force witnesses to give evidence, denying them the right to silence. During the interrogation, Peter Hall admitted involvement in several crimes of the past. Hall admitted to the firebombing of the Torino's nightclub in February 1973, an unsolved arson in which no one was killed. He admitted to doing break-ins as a petty criminal with his fellow Clockwork Orange gang members Garry Shorty Dubois, Tommy Hamilton, and Keith Meredith. However, when the CCC pressed on, he denied any knowledge of any role that Shorty Dubois may have played in the abduction and murder of Barbara McCulkin and her daughters. What was significant about that denial was that Hall was not actually being specifically questioned at that point about the McCulkin disappearance. Also, during the interrogation, Hall let slip a comment. He said, "Shorty went missing the following day." This comment caught the attention of Detective Sergeant Virginia Gray, who realized the significance of what Hall had inadvertently revealed when she listened back to a recording of his CCC interrogation a week later. She believed that Hall was flagging that he knew Shorty Dubois had gone missing after one unspecified but crucially important day. The detectives then realized that Peter might know what happened to the McCulkin family, but didn't want to talk due to the criminal code of silence. Who would blame him? From his experience as a petty criminal in his youth, Hall was bitterly skeptical of police. He believed they were the enemy and was well aware of corrupt police officers from the bad old days of the Queensland Police Force, who were systematically bribed by organized criminals. So Detective Virginia Gray and Mick Dowie had to win Hall's confidence and trust. And slowly, but surely, they did. Peter Hall decided to break the code of silence and reveal what he was told by Dubois just 2 days after the murders. He had kept this secret for 40 years, but he decided to publicly admit his criminal past and reveal what he knew. According to Hall's confession, Barbara McCulkin and her 2 daughters were abducted from their home on January 16, 1974. They were taken to a remote bushland area near Warwick, 2 hours southwest of Brisbane, where O'Dempsey separated Barbara from her children and strangled her to death. Dubois then assaulted at least one of the girls, and both children were murdered and buried with their mother. However, their bodies were never found. Garry Dubois allegedly recounted that they had waited for the sun to rise so they could see what they were doing, and as the light filtered through the trees, they dug holes to bury the bodies. But it was the sight of the lifeless bodies lying there in the morning sunlight that unnerved him the most. In the aftermath of the unspeakable horror, he couldn't get out of the place fast enough. Hall describes Dubois as a victim of circumstance, forced to comply with O'Dempsey's orders or face certain death himself. Anyone who got in his way at the time would have been killed, Shorty included, Hall recalls. It was a terrifying reality that Dubois could not escape, and one that ultimately led to the deaths of 3 innocent lives. Peter Hall recalled that Dubois had invited him to come with them to the McCulkin house that night of the disappearance, promising him that he would have the chance to make love. Peter Hall's decision to decline Garry Dubois' invitation to join him and Vincent O'Dempsey at the McCulkin home was perhaps the difference between life and death. The promise of making love was merely a ploy to entice Hall into joining the depraved duo on their mission to murder the family. In retrospect, it was a bullet that Hall dodged, both literally and figuratively. As Hall reflected on that fateful night, he shudders at the thought of what could have happened had he gone along with Dubois. He wondered if he, too, would have been coerced into committing heinous acts of rape and murder against innocent children. The haunting possibility that he could have been complicit in the horrific crimes still sends shivers down his spine. Whether I'd have had the courage to try and change the outcome, I don't know, Hall muses. But if I had, I think I would have probably been still up there now. The weight of the words and the seriousness of the situation are not lost on Hall. He understands the gravity of what could have transpired had he made a different decision that night. Looking back, Hall is grateful to have escaped the clutches of the Clockwork Orange gang and to have lived to tell the tale. He knows that the McCulkin family was not so fortunate, and their tragic fate serves as a stark reminder of the evils that lurk in the shadows of society. Hall's confession was a significant breakthrough in the case, and Vincent O'Dempsey and Dubois were convicted and sentenced to life in prison on June 1, 2017. Hall's decision to break the code of silence and his willingness to testify in court played a crucial role in securing the convictions. His wife's tears during the interview were likely a combination of relief and stress because her husband was taking a significant risk to bear witness against O'Dempsey and Dubois. Warren McDonald was mentored by Vincent O'Dempsey for a period of 20 years in criminal activities. Warren's father had a history of criminal association with Vincent, and because of that connection, Vincent took Warren under his guidance and mentorship. They had worked together on several criminal ventures, including overseeing a massive illegal cannabis crop in 1997, which McDonald still vividly remembered. During the drive back to Warwick from the crop site, McDonald remembered a conversation they were having concerning a particularly difficult worker who was causing problems at the crop site. O'Dempsey then said, "Oh, you need a notch on your gun." McDonald didn't understand what he meant by that statement, so he asked what it meant, to which O'Dempsey replied that he needed to kill to gain respect. The stunned McDonald let O'Dempsey keep on talking. That was when O'Dempsey raised the McCulkin murders. Just came straight away with it, McDonald remembers. O'Dempsey right there admitted to the McCulkin murders, saying that Shorty was nothing but an assailant and that they would never catch him as they would never find the bodies. Warren McDonald's decision to come forward and testify against Vince O'Dempsey was not an easy one, as he knew the risk involved in speaking out against him. He had kept his secret about O'Dempsey to himself for the last 20 years. but he eventually decided to testify after the police had gathered enough evidence to put him in jail for years for the drug crop. McDonald's testimony was crucial in securing O'Dempsey's conviction for the McCulkin murders. However, McDonald's decision to testify also put him and his family in danger. O'Dempsey had allegedly planned his murder from his jail cell, and McDonald knew that O'Dempsey had a history of making witnesses disappear. McDonald feared for his life and that of his family, saying, "I would be murdered. My family would be murdered. They're trying to murder me now." Despite the risks, McDonald was determined to get the monkey off his back and bring O'Dempsey to justice. He scoffed at suggestions that he had fabricated the allegations to get off the hook, saying that the stress was unbearable and he could be murdered any day. O'Dempsey had once given him sage advice, saying, "If you want to live a long and healthy life, never repeat a word that'll get yourself or anyone else into trouble," which now seemed ironic given O'Dempsey's situation. Peter Hall's partner at the time, Carolyn Scully, had a daughter named Carrie Ann, who was born on July 14, 1981. Carrie Ann recalls Vincent being around when she was growing up a little bit at her mother's house. Vincent and her mother were seeing each other. Carrie Ann grew up and became a heroin addict. In the middle of 2011, Carrie Ann had young children and needed financial help. She called Vincent, who was then living in Warwick. Vincent gave her some money. Carrie Ann and her children then began living with Vincent in his house at Warwick. According to Carrie, Vincent had lots of books. He bragged to her that he had been in lots of newspapers and that he had been written about in a book. He gave Carrie Ann $20 to go and buy a copy of a book called Shotgun and Standover. While lying on the bed, Vincent told her he'll show her what the book said about it. According to her, he was really proud of it. O'Dempsey showed her a picture in the book of himself walking from court with a leather jacket slung over his shoulder and bragged about the McCulkin murders. "I'm good for it, but they'll never get me for it," O'Dempsey said. A little later he said to her, "I did it, and they still couldn't get me for it." Miss Scully left the relationship the next day and remained in fear of the man who she later told police was an intelligent serial killer who covered his tracks. "He takes you in the middle of the night like an angel, and you're gone for good," Miss Scully told a committee hearing in November 2015. The memory of that night still haunted her, the image of O'Dempsey's face etched into her mind. She knew then that he was not just an ordinary man, but a predator, a monster, hiding in plain sight. Carrie Scully went into hiding, living in fear for her life, constantly looking over her shoulder, waiting for the day when O'Dempsey would come for her. But she knew that she had made the right decision, that it was better to live in fear than to become another victim of a man who had no remorse for his heinous crimes. In the final stretch of the trial, a crucial witness emerged, adding weight to the evidence against O'Dempsey. The witness, a remand prisoner whose identity remains undisclosed, had jotted down O'Dempsey's confession on scraps of paper and crossword puzzles. The prisoner testified that O'Dempsey had said, "She had to be dealt with," referring to Barbara McCulkin. He had also tried to distance himself from the murders, claiming that he had never laid a hand on the children and that Shorty had committed the gruesome acts. The informant also revealed that O'Dempsey had approached him after being granted bail, with an attempt to prevent the testimony of Warren McDonald and Carrie Scully in court. The informant detailed how O'Dempsey had shared information about McDonald's daily routine, including the road he took and the roadside diner where he stopped for breakfast. The revelations left no doubt about O'Dempsey's involvement in the McCulkin case and his intention to silence witnesses. With the testimony of the final witness, the case against O'Dempsey and Dubois was complete, and the verdict seemed imminent. Vincent O'Dempsey was a 78-year-old man Born in 1937, who was currently on trial for murder in the Brisbane Supreme Court. His great-grandfather, James O'Dempsey, came to Warwick from Ireland in the mid-1850s and started a family that would ultimately produce a murderer. He sits upright and attentive in the dock, wearing a hearing aid to listen to the proceedings. But those who know him well say that he has always been lacking in empathy and feeling, as he was diagnosed as a psychopath in his youth. O'Dempsey's large meaty hands and coal-black eyes unnerve those who have encountered him. He has never shown any remorse for his actions, and if anything, seems proud of his violent past. His former girlfriend, Carrie Ann Scully, testified in court that he boasted to her about his involvement in the McCulkin murders, and even confessed to being responsible for a total of 33 murders. That would make him one of Australia's worst mass murderers, although he has not been charged for any other murders. There is still speculation that O'Dempsey was involved in the Whiskey A Go Go nightclub bombing that left 15 people dead. O'Dempsey had co-opted Garry Dubois and his Clockwork Orange gang cronies to firebomb Torino's nightclub 11 days earlier, which could offer a possible motive for the McCulkin murders. It is believed that the reason why Barbara McCulkin and her daughters were killed was because they feared she might reveal something she knew about the bombing of the Whiskey A Go Go. The speculation all throughout the murder trial was that O'Dempsey and others were concerned they might be incriminated in the whiskey murders because of their involvement in the Torino arson 11 days earlier. And for that reason, Barbara had to die. Detective Sergeant Virginia Gray told 60 Minutes that she believed Barbara knew enough to get herself into trouble. The children, unfortunately, would have placed O'Dempsey and Dubois at the scene of their mother's abduction that night, so it is suggested that is why they had to die as well. But some people, like Peter Hall, believe that O'Dempsey enjoyed killing for the sake of it. He believed that O'Dempsey went there that night for even baser reasons. Regardless of his motivations, O'Dempsey is a psychopath, gangster, and convicted murderer. After more than half a century, he is only now coming into focus as Australia's worst serial killer. The trial of the McCulkin murders was held in the Supreme Court in Brisbane, where Justice Peter Applegarth presided over the sentencing hearing on May 23, 2017. The court heard that modern laws allowing the court to set a parole eligibility date could not be applied retrospectively. Justice Applegarth addressed both offenders, Vincent O'Dempsey and Garry Dubois, telling them that they were cold-blooded, heartless killers who showed no remorse and would likely die in jail. He said that O'Dempsey had boasted about killing the McCulkins and getting away with it, and that he was a hardened killer and criminal with no conscience. Judge Applegarth stated that O'Dempsey had murdered a defenseless woman and was a child killer who was beyond redemption. He also said that Dubois had no conscience and was a cowardly old man who had aided O'Dempsey and continued to do so out of fear. Justice Applegarth further explained that O'Dempsey used intimidation and traded on his reputation as a mad dog. He said that Dubois had obeyed O'Dempsey and aided in killing and assaulting the girls like a coward. However, when Dubois began talking over the sentence, Justice Applegarth told him to shut up. When he did not comply, Dubois was removed from the courtroom. The judge went on to say that the last hours of Barbara, Vicki, and Leanne's lives must have been terrifying. He said that Dubois was a coward, but O'Dempsey had been the prime offender. Justice Applegarth also explained that it was clear that Barbara McCulkin knew enough about each of the pair's roles in the nightclub bombings at the time for them to want to silence her. He said that Dubois and O'Dempsey had escaped justice for decades, and luck was on their side. So was the fear they installed in others. Justice Applegarth explained that the dedication of police, the testimony of dozens of witnesses, and the conscience and courage of some key witnesses at each of the trials had ensured justice at last. He told the killers that they could have no expectation of early parole. If they maintained their silence over where the bodies were buried, they could not reasonably expect to ever be granted parole. Earlier in the hearing, Justice Applegarth had allowed O'Dempsey to read a handwritten note in the court. In the note, the killer said that he had been wrongly convicted on false testimony and never had any reason to harm the McCulkins. Dubois also requested to speak, but had not prepared anything in writing, so he was not able to address the court directly. Outside court, O'Dempsey's lawyer Terry O'Gorman said that his client was innocent and had been convicted on unfair testimony, including statements from Billy McCulkin, who had since died. However, O'Gorman acknowledged the grief and angst that the McCulkin family had been through. He extended his sympathies to the family while repeating what O'Dempsey had said, that he was innocent of these charges. In the end, Justice Applegarth sentenced both men to life in prison. He told them that they would never be released unless they revealed the location of the McCulkin family's bodies. The judge's words echoed through the courtroom, leaving a lasting impression on all of those present. The story of Barbara McCulkin was not just a tale of tragedy and murder, but also one of secrets and hidden truths. Vincent O'Dempsey may have thought he knew everything about Barbara that fateful night, but there was one thing he didn't know: her daughter. As a young girl of 17 years old, living in Queensland, Australia, Barbara had fallen pregnant, but the family of the boy wanted nothing to do with her. Neither did her parents want her to keep the baby or marry the father. And in those days, tragically, there was no option for an unmarried mother, no domestic support benefits, and nothing but shame and social pressure for having a baby out of wedlock. So she gave her beautiful newborn baby girl away for adoption in 1957. The adoptive parents renamed the baby Joycelyn, and she grew up unaware of her biological family until she discovered the adoption papers hidden in her adoptive mother's bedroom's cupboard in 1972 when she was 14 years old. Joycelyn was devastated when she finally learned the truth about her birth mother, Barbara, and her two half-sisters who were murdered. She had always felt loved by her adoptive family, but the loss of her biological family was a heavy burden to bear. "You can't help but feel so sad about the whole scenario," Joycelyn lamented. "They didn't do anything wrong. Just because she had some information, they didn't deserve to die." Joycelyn often wondered if her mother had been allowed to keep her, would she have ever found herself married to the detestable criminal Billy McCulkin. She also wondered if she had been with her sisters that fateful night in January 1974, would she too have been taken for a one-way drive by Vincent O'Dempsey. During the O'Dempsey murder trial, Joycelyn sat in the public gallery, studying his unemotional visage as his dreadful crimes were detailed. She had hoped to see some remorse or acknowledgement of the pain he had caused her family, but he showed none. Joycelyn was philosophical about not letting O'Dempsey's crimes against her family get under her skin, but she wanted justice to be done. "They're evil men, and they don't deserve to be walking around free," she said. One mystery that remains unsolved is where Barbara and her children's bodies are buried. Joycelyn hopes that the DNA sample taken from her as Barbara's closest living relative may one day be used to confirm their location. "For 45 years I've kept all that to myself," Joycelyn said, her voice trembling. "My mother gave me life, so it was something that I could do for her in death, and just a way of saying thank you to her." Joycelyn implores Shorty Dubois, who surely knows where the bodies are buried, to finally do the right thing. "Could you at least have a shred of decency, and at least tell us where you buried them, so we can have closure for everybody in the family?" However, it is unlikely that Vincent O'Dempsey will ever reveal what he knows. He probably relishes the pain his final foul secret still causes. The story of Barbara McCulkin is a tragic one, but Joycelyn's hope for justice and closure continues to shine through. She may never know all the answers, but she will always honor her mother's memory and fight for the truth. On the morning of June 7th, 2021, a 74-year-old man was found lying lifeless at 4:30 a.m. in his single cell at the Maryborough Correctional Centre in Queensland, Australia. The man was later identified as Garry Dubois, who had been convicted of the manslaughter of Barbara McCulkin and the rape and murders of her two daughters, Vicki and Leanne, in 1974. Staff and paramedics tried to revive him, but he was declared dead at 5:20 a.m. Dubois had been jailed for life in 2017, alongside co-accused Vincent O'Dempsey. Both men were described as cold-blooded, heartless killers who showed no remorse for their crimes. Justice Peter Applegarth, who presided over the case, said that the last hours of the victims' lives must have been terrifying. Dubois was described as callous and a coward, while O'Dempsey was deemed the main offender. Dubois' death occurred just as he was due to testify this month at a reopened coronial inquest into the 1973 Whiskey A Go-Go nightclub bombing. The death was a significant blow to the investigation, as Dubois' testimony could have shed light on the incident and helped to bring those responsible to justice. On May 16, 2022, Vincent O'Dempsey, a convicted triple murderer, testified at a coronial inquest regarding the 1973 firebombing of Brisbane's Whiskey A Go-Go nightclub. O'Dempsey had been implicated in the attack and was asked tough questions about his involvement. He refused to take an oath or affirmation and expressed defiance throughout the proceedings. He denied any involvement in the arson and claimed not to know James Richard Finch, one of the convicted men. When questioned about the disappearance and murders of Barbara McCulkin and her daughters, he evaded the inquiries. Despite O'Dempsey's denials, there was a sense that he was withholding the complete truth. The inquest aimed to uncover further details about the attack and whether others had knowledge of it. With the conclusion of the inquest approaching, the mystery surrounding the Whiskey A Go-Go attack remained unresolved. The family of Mrs. McCulkin and her two daughters expressed relief that justice had finally been served with the guilty verdict of O'Dempsey. However, they also acknowledged that closure cannot be fully achieved until they locate the remains of their loved ones. Brian Ogden, Mrs. McCulkin's nephew, spoke on behalf of the family outside court and said, "The verdict received today has been a long time coming. For 43 years, our families have longed for information and justice." Nestled in the heart of the Lone Star State, Beaumont, Texas, this vibrant city, with its own unique character, sits along the banks of the mighty Neches River. Home to a diverse population, Beaumont pulsates with energy and intrigue. With a population of over 118,000 residents, Beaumont strikes a balance between a close-knit community and the buzz of urban life. Its streets weave a tapestry of history, as evidenced by the stately architecture that adorns its neighborhoods. The city's roots run deep, with a rich cultural heritage that resonates in its art, music, and culinary offerings. But this city was also the stage for the chilling tale of Mary Edwards.